Welcome to Bigfoot Society. If you have Bigfoot activity to report from the same areas discussed in this episode, please reach out to me directly after this episode. And if you'd like to be on the podcast to discuss a personal Bigfoot encounter, please reach out to me directly at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Do you wish there was more Bigfoot Society to listen to every week? Well, there is now. If you become a supporting member over at Patreon, you get a special members-only episode every single week on Wednesdays, and sometimes even more episodes. Head on over to patreon.com/the Bigfoot Society. And now let's get on with the show. All right, Bigfoot Society, we've got the privilege of talking to Harry today. Harry's an individual that had left a comment on the Bigfoot Society YouTube channel, and I had reached out to him, and thankfully he had contacted me back, and he's got some things to share. We'll be going over a few instances that he's experienced over the years, but thanks for being here on the show with me tonight, Harry. How's it going?
It's going good. It's my pleasure.
Very good. I know a little bit about where we're going tonight, but some of this is going to be first listen for me. Yeah, Harry, feel free. If there's anything else that the listeners would need to know about you, feel free to share that, or not. Then you can bring us back to where we need to be when this all started for you.
Okay. I'm 67 years old. I'm in Northwest Georgia, and I've lived in this area all my life so far, I like to say, because I'm not through. It's started in Whitfield County, but later in life here, I went back and I remember something when I was a child that I didn't really register until these latter incidents. And I would like to say that when I was a child, I was in what we call the woods behind the house. It's in Whitfield County in Northwest Georgia. And my brothers left me away from the house, and we were down at the old barn. And I was laughing. I said, I know these woods like the back of my hand, so I'm not worried. I was about 6 years old. This was in about 1963. And what happened at that time, there was a large thicket, and one tree over it, just probably about 75 yards from me, one tree just began to shake violently. And this tree was about 15 or 20 feet high. And like I say, I was just a child at the time. And this tree was just shaking tremendously and violently. And I didn't know what was causing it. I was down there by myself. So I really just, as a child, I put it out of my mind and I forgot about it. Until later in life, when I had these other encounters, and it made me go back and think about that. But if you want to come on around to modern times now, this was in the year 2020, just a few years back, and we have a piece of property that borders the Chattahoochee National Forest. And I was doing some clearing, building a road up through here where I was planning on building. And it's pretty far back up over the mountain, further than most of the other houses in this area. The houses are sparse down in this area. But I was up here by myself, and this was on a fall afternoon. And I heard what I had heard sounded like tree knocks up on the ridge, because I'd seen the Bigfoot program or two. I'd seen first film, especially, and then I'd seen the other films that showed about the tree knocks. And so I heard this up on the ridge a good ways, and I took and started knocking back. And it's repeated several times, and I thought that was really odd, but it stuck out in my mind. But at the same time, just a few moments later, way back up on the ridge, probably about a half a mile from where I was, a loud, I'd best describe it as a singing noise or singing vocalization. It would change in tune like they were singing, but just there were no words to it. And I tried to mimic it, but it was so high that I couldn't get that high. But I answered it and tried to sound like it was sounding. And the next time it sounded back, it was about 200 yards from me. It had gotten much, much closer, and it spooked me. And at that time, I left. And this was the beginning of when I started thinking about maybe there is something to this Bigfoot, even in this area here, Northwest Georgia.
This is very interesting, Harry. I have a few questions about that. So that you said bordering the Chattahoochee National Forest in Northwest Georgia, right?
Yes, and it's also part of the Johns Mountain Wildlife Management Area.
Yeah, yep. Okay, that has come up a few times in other episodes. That's really interesting. Also, the other thing that has come up multiple times, or I've heard it in other places, is this loud singing noise vocalization. Mm-hmm. I've heard that from Southeast Oklahoma. I've heard it mentioned out in the Pacific Northwest in areas out there. Did it sound like it was more masculine or feminine, or what kind of singing would you think?
I would think feminine. One reason being, or the main reason being, because it was so high pitched, and it did not sound like a human. The vocalization was very strong, but it was high pitched. So high pitched that I couldn't reach that high of a pitch, and I tried to mimic it.
And did you say it would go down in pitch as well?
Yes, it was like several different pitches, but I'd say 4 or 5 different tones, but it was very high. And it was like it was singing. It was strange, but it was way off. But though it was way off, it was loud.
Had you... The tune you were singing, the tune that you were listening to, did it remind you of any other song that you've heard before?
No, it didn't, Jeremiah. It was just a series of changing notes, and it didn't remind me of any other song. It was different than anything I've ever heard. As far as that goes, it was just a change of tone, change of pitches.
Music and singing really affects us as humans in different ways, all over the place. Did hearing this affect you in any certain way?
I'm a musically inclined person. I've sang all my life, and I play the guitar. We grew up singing in the Baptist church, as a matter of fact, when we were children. But it sticks with me because it sounded more like singing than just something that didn't mean anything. It sounded like a tune that's something that someone made up, but it didn't sound like anything I knew. It was aware of the difference in tones that it was making, very much aware.
Gotcha. Did it sound like there was just one individual singing, or was it a group of multiple individuals? Yeah.
It was just one individual. It didn't take it long to get closer by a lot. Because like I say, the first time I heard it, it seemed like it was a half mile up on the ridge. And then the next time it was just up behind me a couple of 100 yards. Oof. And I thought that was strange. It was moving fast. It had moved fast. It didn't sing while it was in between. It sang from that far away point until it was behind me. It sang again.
What time of day again was this?
This was early afternoon.
Okay. And so then what did you do after it got extremely closer to you?
I left. I didn't want to experience it or come into contact with anything like that. And it spooked me a little bit because it was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. And so I just left the area.
Was this area that it happened in, was it known for any other encounters or weird things that would happen?
No, I know I have personally, I've been a lifelong outdoorsman. I'm a retired stonemason and a land investor. And I've seen black cats, or what I would consider to be jaguars, and I've heard their sounds. I've actually got a picture of one. I've seen black bear. I've seen bobcats. I've seen foxes. I've seen anything in this area, deer, and it wasn't like any sound I'd ever heard before. And I had never heard anyone say anything about that.
After this happened, did you share it with anyone what had happened to you?
Yes, I did. Yes, I told my wife about it. And I told a couple of my friends about it, and they listened with interest, but they probably didn't think much, but because I wasn't here and I was by myself.
And this was back when you were 63 years old in 2020, right?
Yes. It's before we moved over to where I'm at now. I live in this area. I live here where that happened, which would take me to the next set of experiences.
One more question before we get there. We all remember what happened in 2020. Were there many people out in the woods during that time?
No more than usual. It's very remote because the area is steep. It's the side of a mountain range, which normally no one is going to walk on. And that's the thing about this area. There is so much area where a creature could live that no one would ever step foot upon. It's the side of a ridge, and the ridge is 7 or 8 miles long, and it's just one ridge of many as you go. If you go over the ridge behind the house, you're into the Chattahoochee National Forest, where there's no homes, there's no houses, but you can get to that area. You can drive a four-wheeler back through there, but I'd want to say 90% of the area is so inaccessible that no one would ever walk it or be on a vehicle. And there are what we call the laurel thickets. They're just so thick you can't see 10 foot in front of you. It's so thick.
Absolutely. So, up in Tennessee, I believe I usually hear people talk about that in interviews from people up there, that mountain laurel is hard to get through.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. It's gnarly, very gnarly, and it grows low to the ground, and it's evergreen. The leaves stay on year round, and it makes a beautiful flower in the spring. But you just about have to crawl through it if you're going to get through it.
So interesting. That is very interesting. Now we have this one thing. This will be added to my kind of catalog I have in my mind of different places around the U.S. where people have heard weird singing that's been attributed to some creature out in the woods. But Harry, feel free to continue with what happened next.
Okay. Actually, my wife and I have been here, and in the nighttime, we would actually hear what I would call a singing back up on the ridge, but it was a little bit lower in tone. I didn't think it would have been the same creature, but just for no reason it starts singing. It usually sets the coyotes off to howling, which there's a coyote problem around here. But when the coyotes hear this sound, it gets them excited and they start howling. But it's not a coyote and it's not a wolf. It's a different creature. But that happens too. But now, there's an area. It's the Toccoa River, which is a little bit east from here. It's in a different county, but it's very mountainous and remote. This would be about probably 20 years ago. That's another incident that made me wonder. That's like when I was a child and saw that bush shaking and didn't have an explanation for it. At this certain time, we were camped on the Toccoa River, and there was a campsite about 100 yards long that several campers were there, probably about 15 camps. And I didn't camp right on the river. I camped on the gravel driveway across from the river tracks. But the river there is about 150 feet wide, and it's not a raging river. It flows gently. This particular night, it got to be about 10 o'clock, I guess. Most everyone had steaks on, grilling, and hot dogs and hamburgers. So the smell was the smell of someone cooking. And everyone had music playing. Everybody's in their own camps, but it wasn't a quiet area. They were pretty much partying. And a commotion started out across the river. And I had never heard anything like it then at the time. I didn't think Bigfoot didn't enter my mind back then. But on the opposite bank of the river, it was a cutover and it was real thick. The bushes were shaking like they'd be here, and then 20 feet down the river, they'd go to shaking. And then another area they skip back and forth. Maybe there was different creatures over, and a loud guttural roar, scream, roar. And I was thinking bears, but then I thought somebody's over there playing a trick on us. But it was inaccessible over there. There's no way anyone could have got over there and played that loud of a recording or shook that many bushes at one time. It was unreal because there were so many small trees and bushes shaking, but they were back out of sight, say 30, 40 feet from the river, and it was so thick. And this went on, and every camp on the river was totally quiet. No one was saying anything. It shut the whole camp down from across the river. And whatever this was, just screaming or growling or vocalization as loud as good and shaking bushes up and down that bank. And I thought, first thing I thought at the time was bears. And it finally stopped. This went on about 10 or 15 minutes, and every camp was quiet as they could be. Nobody was saying anything. There was just everyone fascinated. So as it passed, everyone got back to normal. We'll wake up the next morning, and there were some bear tracks around our tent. So that's what I attributed it to. But looking back, I'm not so sure that the bears wasn't on our side of the river to get away from that commotion. The commotion it was just unreal how it was going on. At the time, I didn't think about it being Bigfoot, but looking back, now I'm thinking that could have been Sasquatch. But now I'm still going to get here in a few minutes. I'll get to the eyesight, to the main one.
Sorry, Harry, real quick. What was the year again for that camping incident?
If it were 20 years ago, then it was probably back around 1995 or between 95 and 2000.
Okay.
It's been a long time, but I remember it like it was yesterday.
Oh, absolutely. Was there any weird smells going on around that area besides the meat being cooked?
You couldn't smell anything for all the meat that was cooking.
Oh,
and besides it was all the way across the river. And I never have experienced the smell. I know that a lot of people mention the smell, but I've never experienced an odor or a smell.
Harry, have you ever looked on places like the Bigfoot Mapping Project to see if the area where you've had things happen, if there's other encounters that have happened there too?
No, I haven't.
It might be something that might be fun to do if you ever get the chance later. You just go to bigfootmap.com and you can see where all the different reports are on the map, and you can look up your area where you experienced stuff, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah,
but
I know I have seen on YouTube over around LJ and Toccoa, where I was talking about, there have been some sightings mentioned over in that area. But now where I'm at specifically here, I've not heard of any, so I will look that up because that'd be interesting.
Absolutely, because LJ and Cherry Log and Blue Ridge, that's where the museum's over at, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah,
that's correct.
It's a lot of activity.
Which where I live is probably 70 miles from there, something like maybe 60, 70 miles.
All right. Feel free to continue, Harry.
Okay. A friend of mine, and his name is Greg, and we're hunting on the property, which is in Walker County, Georgia, where I live. And we hunted the afternoon till it got about dark. And when we came down and we got in my truck, and by that time it was dark. It had just got dark, so we had the headlights on. And my driveway is a good ways to the paved road, probably about a half a mile. We drove down to the paved road, and we turned left, and there's a series of S curves, real sharp curves. And there's some chicken houses, which sometimes I think that has something to do with it. But there's a large area of chicken houses off the road, and then there's a couple of houses. But as we were going around the second set of curves, which the real sharp curves, which you drive about 15 to maybe 20 miles an hour. And all of a sudden, this is where I saw it. This creature, which If I reach, I'm 5'10", so if I reach my hands as tall as my head, or as high as I can in the air, and spread them out, that's how large this creature was. Taller and larger than me. I would say this creature was 7 foot tall, easy, and his shoulders were broad, and would look to weigh, I don't know, 400 or 500 pounds. And I stopped my truck in the middle of the road, just hit the brakes, and I looked at Greg and I said, "Did you see that?" And he said, "Yes, I did, but I was not going to say anything if you didn't." And he said it was bipedal, and I said it certainly was. Now, this creature was the color of, I'm going to say, about like dead pine needles, brown. It wasn't black, but it was a reddish brown. And what I saw was a very short glimpse. This creature stepped up on the bank, which if you stop and look there, he was about 6 foot with one step. It stepped up, this to my left, and it was out of sight. At the time, I had stopped dead still in the road. As soon as I stopped and I asked Greg, "Did you see that?" And then he answered me. Then I eased on up just a few feet to where it actually crossed the road. And the trees had been cleared out. There was a big oak tree grove there. But I didn't see anything moving at all. Whatever, it was gone. Whether it had run as fast as it could, whether it climbed up, I don't know. But I plainly saw, and I've never seen anything like that before. I've never seen anything like it since. The only way I could describe it is that it was a Bigfoot. That's the only thing in my mind that looks like that. But this creature was very large and very fast, and we both saw it and were amazed, and it was gone in an instant. Now, that's what I saw, and I cannot unsee that, not in my mind. I will always see it, and that's what I'm going to say is my sighting of a Bigfoot, because it makes no sense what any other creature that could have been.
Oh wow, Harry, that is intense. So you saw it for a very short, probably just a second or two. It sounds like.
So I'm gonna say 2 seconds.
Yeah.
1001, 1002, and it was gone. That was from about, I'm gonna say that was like 40 yards, and then I slammed the brakes on.
Gotcha. And this sounds like, was it a side view as it stepped across, or did you get a dead-on forward view, or?
No, it was turning to what I would say it was turning to its right, and it crossed in front of us. So it was like a side view of the creature, but it was just a huge mass.
So you mentioned it made a pretty long stride when it was walking across. Was it doing anything? Did you notice anything else weird about its gait, how it moved, how it was holding its arms?
Because when I saw it, it was already on the left side of the road. And what I actually saw was it go from the road, and it's 6 feet up that bank, and there's a trail there. It's a 6 foot step up to that bank, and the creature made that in one step.
Oh my
goodness.
goodness.
It was just quick. It was gone. Now, what I got to thinking, the chicken houses down this area, they're on the right side of the road, and there's 2 sets of them. And maybe the chickens, where they throw out the dead chickens, attracted it, or for what it was doing down there, I don't know. It came out of a cattle pasture where the chicken houses are.
You mentioned that it had reddish brown hair. Did you happen to see if it had long hair, or shorter hair?
It appeared to have the hair like a golden retriever's length or something, 3 or 4 inches of hair. It was covered. It was hair all over. It's what I saw. I didn't see any distinct features like the face or the hands or the feet. I saw it just on the side of the road that moved so quickly that I didn't see anything distinct about it.
When it moved up the bank, did it have to reach up and grab anything to pull itself up, or did it just step right up that bank?
That's a very interesting question. I have not thought about that until you said it, and in my mind, it made me picture that I did see the creature reaching. When you mentioned that, it went back in my memory, and I could see the creature reaching to get up 6-foot bank, but it still made it one step, reaching forward like it made that long step and reached forward. And that was all I could see of it. It was just before we moved over here in the camper and I started building the house. Actually, I started building the camper first, a cabin first. Which would lead me to the other part of the story, which would be the last part of the story.
After you had that roadside sighting, Harry, how did that affect you?
I'll never forget it. And I knew it was not a bear. I knew it was not a deer. I knew it was not a bird. I just accepted the fact that I've seen a Bigfoot. Now, I've told people about this, and some people are very interested. Some people listen and with respect. Some people make fun, and they're not going to believe you, whatever you say. They don't believe in it. But you will not convince me that the Bigfoot is not real, because that's what I've seen. And I don't know what else it could have been. It's my Bigfoot sighting, and I was not looking for it. I was not expecting it, but I cannot get it out of my mind. I can see it right now just as plain as I saw it back then. It is burned into my memory.
A lot of witnesses will try to talk themselves out of what they saw or logically think it could be something else. Is there any chance it could have been something else, or was it just what you saw was so blatantly a Bigfoot?
If I had been by myself, I may have questioned it. But my friend Greg saw the same thing that I did, and he described the same thing that I saw. And to this day, we both will say that's what we saw was a Bigfoot. There's not another creature in this area there's nothing like it.
Wow. That is incredibly awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
I enjoy sharing it because people need to know, if they're wanting to know, that I am an eyewitness, and I'm sure there are others around in this area and this state, but I would verify that. I would promise you that's what I saw. I don't believe in swearing, but I'm going to tell you that's what I saw. There's no doubt in my mind.
I'll tell you, I've talked to a few people that have definitely had sightings in that northwest corner where you're at, in especially that John Mountains wildlife area, which is, I believe the other people I talked to were down by Armici.
Armici.
Yeah, Armici. Yeah,
that's
exactly.
This area.
Yep.
Yeah, that's this area here. That's not far at all.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
And there's a lot of open land between, when you get on over even to Alabama, the terrain is the same. There's farms and farmland, and there's woodlands, and there's a lot of area. And the sides of these mountains are inaccessible, and a creature could live and never be seen unless it wanted to, or unless it was an accident when it was down on the road or something.
It's weird. If you start to look at a map and you just focus on like the wildlife areas, and you look at that Georgia in Alabama, it's almost like there's an invisible diagonal line that connects this Johns Mountain, and you can almost connect it down to the whole Talladega National Forest, which is interesting.
We call this the foothills of Appalachia. The mountains, what we call a mountain, a lot of people wouldn't call a mountain. They're even though the elevation is like 1,500 feet above sea level here. I can be, in 30 minutes, I can be to the top of it if I'm hiking a pretty good pace. But the foothills and the range, they just go and go all the way down to about below Rome, Georgia, and then over into Alabama. But that's probably what would appear to be still wildlife areas, or where the wildlife reserves are, is the mountain range that can't really be developed for anything else.
Absolutely. Harry, feel free. I believe we're on number 5, if you would like to share that as well.
Okay. When I was working on the cabin here, and I was doing it all by myself, my wife and I, and this was about 2:00 in the morning. This is something I can't forget and can't get out of my mind. This was about 2:00 in the morning, and we were finished, so I turned the generator off, and I turned the lights off, and I was throwing things in the back of my truck, like shovel and just clanging, a bunch of clanking going on, making a lot of racket. And I heard the noise, and my wife said, "Did you hear that?" And I said, "No, I didn't." What? And then I was quiet. And she was, about that time, this creature let out a guttural, as loud. It was, this shook you on the inside. This creature was 100 yards only at the most from where we were standing, up on the side of the ridge behind where we're working. And it let out the loudest guttural vocalization that I've ever heard. If I was going to compare it to anything, it would be compared to an African lion, not a bear. And it shook me to the bone. And it did. And she said, "You heard that?" And I said, "I certainly did. Let's go. Let's get out of here." Because that scared me. Now, this is the first time this creature has scared me, which I want to say that I believe this creature does not want to bother us, because if it wanted to, it could. But this was so loud, like it was so angry or so much proclaiming its territory and letting us know. See, this is when I first moved up here. I was first moving up here and staying up here some. This was so scary and so loud and hair-raising that I was ready to go and get out from here, which is what we did. This creature screamed, growled, what you want to call it, vocalized. This lasted for about a minute, which is a long time to hear something like this. And it started a little bit low, but it ended up so loud with so much power that it was something unreal. And we heard it plainly and clearly, and we left. Both of us left. And it scared us. It didn't scare us to the point where we wasn't coming back, but I said if it wanted to hurt us, it could hurt us, because at any time. But I will never forget that, and I'm going to tell you, if anyone ever hears that sound, they will never forget it. And whatever it is, that could only be a Bigfoot. It's not a bear. It's not a bobcat. It's not a mountain lion. It's not a fox. It's louder than the loudest African lion as it growls and roars. So that's since then we've heard a little bit of the singing up on the mountain and a tree knock or two, but it's like the creature let us know that he was here. Also in the same area, I do have a grainy picture on my trail camera, and this was where the hollering was coming from. And it's just a big blob of fur, but I can make out the outline of the arm and the side of the body, and the arm is just tremendously huge, and that is where the vocalization came from. So I put those two together. But it's something that's there again, I'll never forget it. And that's why I believe I take all the experiences that I've had, the separate ones, and there's got to be something. There is no way that there's got to be a Bigfoot. That could only been a Bigfoot making that vocalization. It was so tremendous. The lung capacity.
Do you think, I'm trying to think what could have made it just make that huge noise for a minute. Do you think it may have had something to do with you doing all that work at that time?
Yes. I don't think it appreciated this being in its area. And I was working on the cabin, which is just a small cabin, simple. But I had been working on it a few days and pretty much had it was in the dry, and we'd been working on the inside of it. And it was working late into the night. But it was more of I would say, a territorial type. It was not afraid to let us know that he was there. And I would not have been surprised if it had come on down closer if we had stayed. But we left immediately, because I did not want to face any creature that with that sound. It was angry.
You mentioned that you've heard the singing again after that. Is this at night or random times in the day, or?
It's at night. It's usually late at night, back up on the mountain. Now, the Pinhoti Trail, which is an extension of the Appalachian Trail, runs along the ridge up here at the back of the mountain, back behind me. And we would hear it back up in that area late at night when there would no be, which is not a human sound, but it's when there would be no one on the Appalachian Trail.
So
in the Pinhoti there.
When you're saying late at night, do you mean around like midnight or even later, like around 2 or 3?
Yeah. Around 2 or 3 in the morning, something like that.
Yeah. Oh boy. That is very interesting. Have you ever been able to get a recording of that singing at all?
I tried one night. I heard the singing, and the time I got to my phone and got the recording on, I didn't get it on the phone. Which it was so far away. It was, I don't know if it would have picked up or not. But this is that sound that gets the coyotes going.
Sure.
It's like it triggers them.
You mentioned that you have a photo off of a game cam. Is that anything that you might be able to share? It sounds like it'd be interesting to be able to see.
Yeah, sure. I can send it to you.
Cool. Thank you. I'd love to take a look at it. It's one of these days, someone is going to get the one photo that is just going to change it. So if someone brings it up, I always ask for sure. Harry, I got to ask you, do you have any thoughts as to, I guess you did get a pretty good sighting. Based on what you saw, do you think when we're talking about Bigfoot, we're talking about a large ape-type creature or maybe something that's more human?
I don't know. The sighting that I had was so quick and I wasn't close enough. But it would have to have an intelligence level pretty high to not be seen and to stay hidden. But by choice, I would say. I think its intelligence level is as high as a human, probably. They're smart creatures, especially when they're in their own environment. I have thought about getting out and maybe hunting up on the sides of the ridge, but I'm not a young man anymore, and I don't travel as good as I used to. And it would be difficult to traverse those laurel patches up through there. I was just wondering if someone might come through here and do enough walking that they could finally get a picture of one. It makes me wonder.
I totally understand. I think that's part of what this might take is just get enough people out there in certain areas, and maybe we'll get a picture someday or some video, but they are extremely elusive and very smart. I agree with you on that.
I think so. But like I say, I'm not afraid anymore. Now, if I heard that loud vocalization, I might be afraid. But living here, I figure it's accepted us because I've not heard, when I had any confrontations, it had every chance in the world. If it wanted to bother us, it could. But I believe it wants to live in peace and be left alone. I really wouldn't want to see one while I was out deer hunting. I would not want to shoot one. Only if I thought I had to, out of self-defense.
Right. Well, Harry, thank you. Thank you so much for reaching out and for sharing what you've experienced over the years. It's definitely it's a very important conversation, if only for the fact of there's another part of the country where there's this singing being heard. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate you coming on the show tonight.
I enjoyed it very much, and you're welcome.
If you ever do have anything else happen, feel free to reach out, and would love to catch up at a later time.
Okay, I will. Thank you very much, Jeremiah.
Here at Bigfoot Society, our goal is to provide a platform for those that have encountered Bigfoot to share their encounter in a safe and respected environment. But we need to hear your story. If you've experienced something that you just can't explain, please send me an email at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Then we can start the conversation. And I know a lot of you have not shared your encounter at all. It's been 20 years, and it's time that you get this off your chest, and then you can get some well-deserved rest, because I know you haven't been sleeping. I understand what you're going through, and I appreciate every one of you listening.
Bigfoot Society podcast, hosted by our captain, Jeremiah Byron, where it's all Bigfoot all the time. Have you ever had the urge to do more, to be more? Now you can by joining Bigfoot Society on the Patreon. Get ad-free episodes and even member-only episodes. Take part in movie night and even live video chats. Interact behind the scenes with Jeremiah and other Patreon members like me, Slaya. The powerful podcast goes on, and you may contribute a verse in our Patreon community. Carpe diem. Seize the day, Bigfooters, and make your lives extraordinary.
Please take a minute to help out the show by subscribing on YouTube, making sure you hit the bell so you don't miss any notifications, and share the episode on YouTube with a friend. Also, if you're listening to us on a podcast, thank you so much. Make sure that you're subscribed, share the show with a friend. Really, it's all about sharing the show wherever you can. If you've had a Bigfoot encounter related to the following or know someone who has, please reach out to me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com or pass on my email. Here's the list.
These are all in Oregon, by the way. Oak Ridge, Dexter, Fall Creek, Deschutes National Forest area, Cultus Lake, Spirit Lake, Subtle Lake, McKenzie River area, Sweet Home area, the area west of Crater Lake, east of 230 West Diamond Lake Highway, and north of 62 Crater Lake Highway.
You can use email bigfootsociety@gmail.com. A special thank you to all the Bigfoot Society Patreon and YouTube channel members. It's your support that helps keep the show going, and I extremely appreciate it. If you want to join in the fun, you can join over at patreon.com/the Bigfoot Society. I'll see you there. And again, thanks for listening.